My name is DJ Riley. I'm basically a gospel DJ in Botswana, and I'm regarded as the actual first gospel DJ. And it's truly an honor to start such a movement in Botswana. And growing up, talking about my testimony, I grew up in a family of 5. I'm actually the eldest, and then it's been quite a challenge, at times where my dad wasn't there for me, and he'd be on trips, work basically. And then I ended up basically having to mold my own kind of man in an instance where I had guys that I was growing up with and just did stuff that they used to do, fornicating and basically using drugs and alcohol. Those are the stuff that we go through as youngsters. We try and experiment and such. So I went through all that life from ever since I was in junior high and senior school, and more especially when I was in high school, because that's the time when my parents were not around and I was at a boarding school, so tended to do a whole lot of stuff that you could ever think of at this time. And then I remember after I finished my Form 5, I stayed with my mom, and at that time she's one woman who loves God, and there's a time when she invited me to church, and during that period where there's a break between from Form 5 until your university level. So during that vacation, she once invited me for a service at church. I went there, spent time with some youth at that point, and I was quite inspired on the way these guys were living. I mean, young men like me, the way they lived their life and all that. I started hanging around them, going to parties, hangouts, youth events and all that stuff. And they seriously lived a life which is quite different from what I was living at that moment. So I still had stuff that I was doing on the other side. Going to church but not really fully committing to what God wants and all that. And some of the stuff I didn't really understand. So at that point, I sort of tended to pretend, go with these guys and then make up a lifestyle that could actually fit with what they were doing. And then as time went on, I couldn't really keep up. I had to just find out who this God is and why this guy is doing things the way that they're doing them, apart from the way that I was living life before. So yeah, I started researching more about this God and trying to seek him and his ways and how he does things. So I'm one person who has always been attached to music, and that's how I basically got saved. Introduction to Ray and these other guys who do gospel, and I started DJing back in junior high. With a 3 CD changer, like you press next, and then you are the coolest DJ ever. And then from that to high school, where there was a mini deck, that's where I started going to the basics of DJ. And then from there I went to a level where I was in varsity, where now you actually DJed with the real stuff now. So still going to church and then DJing, those were two things that I ended up adding to one, which was gospel DJing. And then I wasn't really at a point where I would say I was really aware of who God is and what he wants for me, or the purpose that he wants in my life. So at times I would do stuff for my own glory but not for his glory, because I didn't really understand what was the full purpose that God wants for me in my life. So I remember there was a time where I spent some time with my friend, a friend called Bobo. He's part of the Unashamed team in Botswana. We sat down, and all the time that we sat down and talked, I was always popping out plans. Dude, you should do that and that and that and that and that. And one thing that stood out that day, he said, dude, can I talk to you? Like, okay, cool. What's there that we really need to talk about? And then he said to me, guy, it seems like you want to do this in your own way, you want to do it on your own, but God really wants to use you and he wants to take you to places. But the thing is, if you don't let him take control and be the center of what you do, you won't really basically fulfill what God wants for your life. So I was like, wow, this is something else. That day I swallowed my pride. I went home, closed myself in my room. I remember it was in July, a third day of 3rd of that month. That was a Friday. that day I went into my room and then I seek this God that they speak of. I was like, God, show yourself now. If you really want to use me, show your light in this room. This is where it all starts. So I sat there and then I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and surely showed himself. I even remember feeling his arm behind me. He was like, I've got your back. And then I was like, wow, this is intense. And that's the first time I ever teared up, like having tears run through me as a man. It was quite interesting. And then he told me to actually take the Bible and flip it once, which I did. After praying, I sat on my bed and I took that Bible, flipped it once. Actually flipping, I mean like I hold it this way and then just let it go. So the first verse that came was like Proverbs 3 verse 6, which says, remember the Lord in everything that you do so that he may show you the right way. So it seriously spoke to me in a sense that I did stuff for my own glory and didn't really consider the fact that it's all for God's work. You know, I'm not doing God a favor by doing his work, but I have to fulfill the purpose that he has for my life. So yeah, he spoke to me, and then the second time he told me to flip it again, closed it up again, and then flipped it once more. And then the second verse that came was Revelation 3 verse 6. Remember, that was Proverbs 3 verse 6, those number coordinates. So the second one was Revelation 3 verse 6, which says, if you have ears and eyes, listen to what the Lord is saying to the churches. So that on that note was talking about me not really serving in his home. As much as I might be out there doing his work and all that stuff, what matters is me serving in his home. That's where we get the humility as public figures and all that stuff. So in doing his work. So those two verses, 3 verse 6, 3 verse 6. I had a friend of mine who I used to work with before called Jay. He's in my first and second project, Boombox 1 and the True to Life project. He had a movement called 360. 360 basically means, like, you know, the circumference of a circle. It's like a complete turnaround where things completely change. So those 3 verse 6, 3 verse 6 meant 360, 360. And all in all, I took those 360 and 360, added them up. The equation was 360 plus 360 equals to 720. And that same night, I asked God, like, what does this mean in context? And then that first 360 actually means, like, the 3 becomes T, and then the 6 becomes an R, and then the O becomes a U. And that there's a plus sign in between, which is a 2. A plus sign obviously means 2 or more. And then the second one, which is the other 360 for Revelations, it talks about the life, me actually applying myself in his church and all that stuff. So it basically becomes LYF, that 363, 60 LYF. So the whole equation was True to Life, which is equals to 720. So that's how I came about that whole equation. So from that night, things just changed, man. Like, I started really focusing on what God wants me to do. Had to have mentors, which I have at this moment, and ever since then it's been a journey which is really exciting, you know, giving him my full potential and all that I have, and him taking me places, which is quite interesting. It's a life where you actually learn a lot. It's a journey in a way, if I may say. It's a journey. We learn each day by day. I depend on his grace and all that I do in life. And yeah, that's my testimony. And be sure to actually check my projects on Facebook, SoundCloud and all that. Facebook, Riley Surajani. SoundCloud, DJ Riley. Twitter is at Misfits Boombox, and my record label is at Dynasty Records 3. Yeah.